I've noticed we're losing subscribers. Not the YouTube kind, but the kind that swore they'd be in my life forever. Funny how that works. One day you're surrounded by people who claim to love you, and the next, you're watching them walk away like you were just another phase in their lives. By the way, if you're here, do me a favor, subscribe. It's free, and unlike some people in my life, you won't regret sticking around. I always knew my sister Dove hated me, but I never imagined she would stoop this low. Dove was the golden child, the beautiful, confident, and adored daughter, while I was the invisible one. Growing up, she made sure I knew my place. She taunted me, humiliated me, and turned everyone against me. My parents? They worshipped her. If she messed up, they looked the other way. If I so much as breathed wrong, I was the disappointment. But karma has a way of evening the scales. Dove, the so-called perfect daughter, threw away her future for a wealthy man who divorced her the moment he saw her true colors. Now at 29, she was back at our parents' house, broke, bitter, and desperate. And that's when I made the worst mistake of my life. I introduced her to my fiancé, Atlas. Atlas was everything I had ever dreamed of: kind, successful, and loyal. We met at work, and after years of feeling like I wasn't good enough, he made me believe I was. He treated me like I mattered, like I was the only woman in the world. And that was exactly why I hesitated to introduce him to my family. I knew Dove. I knew her games. I knew she couldn't stand to see me happy. But Atlas was curious. He had met my friends, his own family adored me, and yet I kept delaying meeting mine. So I caved. I finally brought him home. The dinner was unsettling. My parents were on their best behavior. My mom overly sweet, my dad slightly awkward. But Dove? She was something else. She laughed a little too hard at Atlas's jokes, touched his arm unnecessarily, flipped her hair and smiled at him like she wasn't my sister but some random woman at a bar trying to get his number. Atlas, bless his soul, kept his distance. He later reassured me, "She's just trying to get under your skin. I would never fall for someone like her." But Dove wasn't done. A week before our wedding, an anonymous message popped up on my phone. It contained a video. My hands shook as I opened it. The footage was grainy, but the voices were crystal clear. Atlas. She had cornered him at a family gathering, her voice low and sultry. "You don't have to marry her, you know," she whispered. "I see the way you look at me. We have way more chemistry. You deserve better." Atlas took a step back, his voice firm. "I love her, Dove. And if you ever pull something like this again, I'll tell her everything." And yet she didn't stop. She moved closer, her hand grazing his chest. "Are you sure about that?" Atlas shoved her away. "Stay the hell away from me." I couldn't breathe. I watched the video again and again until rage burned away my shock. She tried to steal my fiancé. My own sister. The next morning, I showed up at my parents' house with the video. When I played it for them, Dove didn't even flinch. Instead, she smirked. "You should be thanking me," she said. I was testing his loyalty. For the first time in our lives, my parents didn't defend her. My mother looked sick. My father, who had always been more lenient with her, was furious. "Get out," he said coldly. She scoffed. "You're choosing her over me?" "Yes," my dad said. "We are." And just like that, Dove was disowned. My wedding went on without her, and despite the chaos she caused, it was the happiest day of my life. I married the man I loved, surrounded by people who truly cared about me. As for Dove, I don't know where she is now. Last I heard, she was couch surfing at friends' places, still blaming me for everything. But I've stopped caring. She tried to take everything from me. Instead, she lost everything herself. I always knew my sister Dove had a twisted sense of entitlement, but what she did next left even me speechless. She had spent her entire life trying to make me feel small, convincing me that I was unworthy, that I'd never be good enough. Dove was obsessed with wealth, beauty, and control. She married rich, divorced richer, and thought the world should bow at her feet. And when my life started to outshine hers, she simply couldn't handle it. I had worked hard for everything I had. My dream job, my financial independence, and most importantly, the love of my life, Atlas. He was kind, successful, and loyal, the kind of man Dove had always wanted but could never truly keep. And that drove her insane. When she found out about him, she changed overnight. Suddenly, she was interested in my life, asking about Atlas in ways that made my skin crawl. I could see through her act, but there was no avoiding it. If she wanted to try and tear us apart, she would find a way. So, I decided to stop running. I brought Atlas home to meet my parents. From the moment we walked through the door, Dove was on the attack. She had transformed herself, dyed her hair, spent hours perfecting her makeup, and picked out an outfit that screamed, "Notice me." And when she saw Atlas, She threw herself at him like a desperate teenager. She barely acknowledged me, focusing entirely on him. At dinner, she rushed to sit next to him, clinging to his every word, claiming they had so much in common, even when it was obvious she was lying. Every time I spoke, she would cut me off, redirecting the conversation back to herself. When Atlas complimented something, she exaggeratedly gasped, insisting she loved it too. It was humiliating to watch. Atlas, bless him, was polite but distant. He barely looked at her, never engaged in her attempts to flirt. I thought she would get the message. I was wrong. After dinner, I stepped away to take a quick shower, trusting that my parents were still in the living room with him. I wasn't gone for more than 10 minutes. But when I came back, the house was eerily quiet. I walked toward the hallway, and that's when I heard it. Dove's voice. Oh, sultry. You don't have to marry her, she purred. You and I, we'd be so good together. You deserve someone exciting, someone beautiful. Not her. My blood ran cold. I turned the corner just in time to see her reach out, fingers grazing Atlas's chest. He stepped back immediately, his voice sharp. Are you insane? But Dove wasn't done. Come on, she whispered. You don't have to pretend. I know you're attracted to me. Why settle when you can have someone better? Atlas's face twisted in disgust. You are not better. And I would never betray her. That's when I stepped forward. Good to know, I said. Dove's head snapped toward me, her face draining of color. For the first time in her life, she was caught. I pulled out my phone. I had been recording. Every word, every move, caught on camera. And I wasn't about to let her slither her way out of this one. You're pathetic, I told her. And now, everyone is going to see exactly who you are. Dove tried to lunge at me, but Atlas stepped between us. My parents came rushing in at the commotion, demanding to know what was happening. Without a word, I pressed play. The room fell silent as my parents listened to the truth. My mother paled. My father's expression darkened. Dove, he said, his voice cold. You're done. She tried to deny it, to spin it in her favor, but the evidence was right there. There was no escaping this. My father had finally had enough. Get out, he said. Her lips parted. What? You heard me, he snapped. We're done with you. Pack your things and get out of my house. For the first time in her life, Dove had lost. She had spent years manipulating people, bending reality to her will, but this time there was no saving her. She was disowned. That night, Atlas and I left hand in hand. And for the first time in my life, I felt free. Dove tried to take everything from me, but in the end, she lost everything herself. Dove just couldn't take the loss. Even after Atlas and I got engaged, she refused to let go of her sick obsession. She was determined to worm her way into his life, one pathetic scheme at a time. It started with her suddenly losing her phone and asking Atlas to call her number. A weak excuse just to get his digits. Then came the late-night calls, the emotional manipulation, the staged breakdowns about her traumatic divorce, all designed to make him feel sorry for her. And the worst part? My mother encouraged it. When Atlas politely rejected her sob stories, Mom jumped in, trash-talking Jeremy, feeding Dove's victim narrative. It was disgusting. Atlas saw right through it. When she tried to insert herself into our private time, he shut her down. When she shamelessly threw herself at him, he ignored her. I knew he was loyal, but her persistence made my blood boil. I thought we were done with her antics. But then I checked his phone. Dove was still texting him. Still calling him. And the worst part? She had even started liking and commenting on his old social media posts, digging up pictures from 7 to 10 years ago. Who even does that? I felt sick. Atlas swore he had been ignoring her, that he thought keeping quiet was the best way to handle it. But I wasn't about to let this slide. I told him next time she called, I would answer. And sure enough, it didn't take long. One night, around 3 a.m., her name lit up his phone screen. Atlas nudged me awake, and with a deep breath, I answered. Hello. Silence. Then in the faintest voice, Dove muttered, Oh, I called the wrong number. And hung up. Coward. The next day, I called her repeatedly. No answer. So I texted her from Atlas's phone. This is me. If you have something to say, say it to me. Otherwise, stop calling and texting my fiancé. No response. But at least finally she backed off. Or so I thought. The breaking point. A few weeks later, Atlas proposed. It was the happiest moment of my life. A beautiful, heartfelt proposal, with him down on one knee and the most stunning ring I'd ever seen. I was over the moon. I sent a picture to my dad, glowing with excitement. And somehow Dove got her hands on it. That's when the stalking started again. Atlas showed me his phone. She was back. liking his posts, sending ridiculous videos, bombarding his inbox with messages, acting like they were best friends. I snapped. I called her and let everything out. Stop playing games. You are embarrassing yourself, Dove. Get a life. She barely said a word, just stayed silent while I tore into her. But I should have known, Dove never backs down without a fight. The moment I hung up, Mom called. She was furious. How dare you talk to your sister that way, she screeched. She's having panic attacks because of you. Do you even care? I laughed bitterly. Panic attacks? Mom, she's not heartbroken. She's obsessed with my fiancé. And you're enabling it. Mom refused to listen. She accused me of being cruel, of making Dove's life harder when she was still recovering from her traumatic divorce. Traumatic? Please. Dove had celebrated that divorce. I hung up. Then I called my dad. If you and Mom keep ignoring what Dove is doing, I will cut all of you out of my life. And I meant it. The final straw. Planning the wedding was supposed to be the happiest time of my life. But instead I had to deal with her. My cousin called me one day, warning me that Dove was still running her mouth. She's telling everyone that you don't deserve Atlas, she whispered. That she should be the one with a man like him. I felt like I was going to throw up. Dove had always bullied me. Always put me down. But this? She was trying to rewrite reality, to make me the villain in her story. She even told people that I was the one jealous of her. And then, the final blow. Dove showed up to my wedding dress fitting. Uninvited. Wearing a white dress. She waltzed in like she owned the place, a smug little smirk on her face, and said, I just wanted to see what you picked. I lost it. You're not invited to the wedding, Dove? I said coldly. Her smirk vanished. W what? You heard me. You are not invited. She laughed like I was joking. But I wasn't. You've tried to ruin my relationship. You've disrespected me, body-shamed me, stalked my fiancé, and played the victim when things didn't go your way. You don't deserve a place at my wedding. She turned to my mom, expecting her to defend her. But for the first time, Mom didn't say a word. Dad, on the other hand, spoke up. She's right. You don't belong there, Dove. That was the moment she finally realized she had lost. Her fake sobs, her tantrums, her desperation. None of it worked anymore. Atlas and I got married without her there. And it was perfect. I blocked her on everything. And from that moment on, she was nothing to me. Dove had spent her whole life trying to destroy mine. But in the end, she only destroyed herself. Final part. Dove's last stand. Even after everything, I thought I had seen the worst of Dove. But she had one final, desperate trick up her sleeve. After my father kicked her out, she had nowhere to go. No one wanted to take her in. Her reputation was in shambles. Friends she once charmed had finally seen her true nature. She tried playing the victim, claiming she was set up, and that Atlas had led her on, but no one bought it. Then one evening, just as Atlas and I were settling into our new life, I got a message from an unknown number. You'll regret this. I'll make sure you lose everything. I knew immediately who it was. I showed Atlas and he sighed. She's not worth our time. But I wasn't about to let her get away with another attempt to ruin my life. I called my dad, who had already been keeping tabs on Dove. He told me she had been begging my mom to let her move back in, but for once, Mom didn't cave. Dove was truly on her own now. A week later, she made her final mistake. She showed up at our house. It was late, past midnight, when I heard the doorbell ring. My heart pounded as I checked the security camera. It was her, looking disheveled, mascara streaked down her face. I didn't open the door. Instead, I turned on the intercom. Go home, Dove. She let out a bitter laugh. I don't have a home. You took everything from me. No, you lost everything all on your own. She banged on the door, screaming profanities, blaming me for every failure in her life. Atlas stood beside me, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. Then suddenly silence. My father had called the police. The moment they arrived, Dove went into full victim mode, sobbing and claiming that we had manipulated her family into abandoning her. But the officers weren't interested. There was already a restraining order in progress, thanks to Atlas's family who had taken action after the wedding incident. She was escorted away. And just like that, she was out of our lives for good. Moving on. It took time, but I eventually stopped looking over my shoulder, waiting for Dove's next scheme. Atlas and I focused on building our future, one she could never touch. Last I heard, Dove had burned every bridge she had left. She moved from place to place trying to start over, but her reputation followed her. And me? I was finally free. I never imagined my own sister could be capable of such cruelty. but in the end she destroyed herself. And I never looked back. This story is a powerful reminder that not everyone who smiles at you has good intentions, even family. Sometimes the people closest to us can be the most toxic, and it takes courage to stand up for yourself and protect your peace. Trust your instincts. If someone's behavior feels off, don't ignore the red flags. Set firm boundaries. Don't let guilt or family pressure force you to tolerate toxic behavior. Believe in your partner. Open communication and trust are key to overcoming manipulation. Karma is real. People who thrive on deceit and cruelty will eventually face the consequences of their actions. Dove lost everything because of her own actions. No matter how much she tried to twist the truth always comes out. Does this story resonate with you? Have you ever dealt with a toxic family member or someone who tried to sabotage your happiness? Share your experience in the comments. Let's support each other in recognizing and escaping toxic situations. Comment below your thoughts. Like and share if you believe in protecting your peace.